So when we work with React application, really we just have a single page HTML. In this case, this is pretty much the page we're on. So if we wanted to simulate a website with multiple pages, we would basically want to somehow grab whatever's on this page and replace it with some other information from a different page using JavaScript, because there's really no other pages. Just to give an example, right now, if I go on top here, see, we're on the home page right now, localhost 1234. If I go on top here and try to navigate to some other page, it will still go to the same page. So what we could do, we could look at what's in our URL and use JavaScript based on what's in here to load something else. So to give you an example, if I just go here and do console log window location, which is available on our window object on our browser. So if I save this and go back and take a look, let's just look at our console log. And if you look here, see it says it was cleared, and then it says location is basically this. So it gives us this URL on top. Now this location has other properties inside of it. So for example, see, we have this path name, which basically points to this /about part, which is the page we're on. So what we could do, we could basically just do .pathname, for example, and based on this, we could figure out in our JavaScript which page we're on. If we're on about page, see, it's going to say /about. If we're on a different page, if I enter, see, it will output that. If we're on the home page, it will basically just output the slash. So what we could do some sort of if statement and check if we're on that particular path. Based on that, let's just return something else here. Now, technically, we could do all of that from scratch, but there's a library to handle all of this without us having to build this entire thing from scratch. So that's what we're going to use instead. So the library is called React Router. Let me open their page. So there we are, reactrouter.com. So it seems like they just released a new version, v6. We'll try to use whatever is available. Hopefully it's going to work with our version of React we have. So I'm going to go to this read the docs and see here, hopefully there's going to be some help. See, there's this getting started section, and I'm going to go to this installation. So the first thing we're going to have to do is install this thing. And if I scroll down, see basic installation, we have npm. And as you can see, it says npm install. So that's the command. So I'm going to copy the command directly from their website documentation, go to my terminal. I'm going to have to do Control-C to get out of this. I'm going to paste that command that I just copied, and I'm just going to run that command to basically install this React router. So some warnings, but no errors. So we got this installed. Now let's go to our documentation and see how we're going to get this done. And I guess before I get to documentation, we want to take care of some pages we want to load. So right now, if I just do npm start again to get this started, if I open this, so basically this is the page we got, right? So what if we wanted to load this on a page called about, and on our home page, we wanted to load something else? So to do this, I'm going to go to this, and this is that stuff we basically load for that bears page. Basically, I'm going to call that our about page. Now let's basically transfer all of that to its own component. So I'll just go ahead here and create a folder. So this is organized. And within this component folder, we're going to create a JavaScript file. I'm going to call this one about.js. And this will be basically our basic React component, which includes our function that returns some sort of JSX, right? Now, to make my life easy, I'll just basically copy all this stuff from this app component page, go to about, paste it here. Now, there is going to be a little difference here since I'm going to be using the CSS. This CSS is located one level up and then CSS. So I'm going to do 2 periods here to adjust. We're still going to get this picture, even though that picture is going to come from the outer folders. So we'll do 2 dots here. And this component is going to be called about, which is the function basically. And we're going to export that here. So other than that, I'm going to leave it all the same, except that instead of saying hello, let's just say about, and let's just convert it to like H1 or something. So that's going to be this about component. Right now, this is not going to do anything because we didn't use this component anywhere else. Now I want to create another component, which is going to be, say, our home page. So I'll create another file here. I'll call it home.js. And I'll just copy paste everything from here. And in this one, I'm not going to use the CSS or the picture. We'll just simply just call it home component, which is our function name. And we'll just say homepage. So very simple, just a function that returns this JSX, which basically just says this text homepage. So I'm going to save this. Now we have 2 components now. One is called home. The other one is called about. For now, I'm going to go to my app.js and I'm going to get rid of the stuff we have in our return. I will also get rid of all the CSS imports and the picture. So right now, let's just enter something here. Now, what we have right now, we have our first index file, this one. Now this imports this app and we render that app here, which is that app component, which is this function, and it's going to return this, and that's it. So at this point, if we go back and look, see it says app component, pretty much what you would expect. So now let's go to that library documentation and try to load those pages when we are on a particular path. So I'll just scroll down a little bit here, and it gives us this example. It says that we have to have this browser router wrapper around our main app rendering. See, this is that place where we basically render that app component. So we have to do this browser router thing around that. So for that, we're going to have to go to our index page, which is our main entry point right here. And instead of returning just this app, it needs to be surrounded within that browser router. So I'm going to move this here. So within this browser router, we're going to have this app. Now, it has no clue what this browser router is. And for that reason, we need to import that. And if we go to their docs, we'll see right here, there's that import from this new library we just installed, React Router DOM. So I'm going to copy this, go back, and basically make sure that I import this here. So at this point, it should know what this browser router is because we import it from here. And then we wrap this app within this. So I'm going to save that. So let's go back to our documentation and scroll down. So now we should be able to use the actual router here, see, in our main entry app. And here we basically have these routes with this route element inside of this. So I'm going to copy this much, go to our file, go to my app.js, and we'll go maybe below this H1 and just put this. Right now we have this routes and route that we use, which again, it has no clue what those things are. So we need to import those on top here so it knows what we're dealing with. And again, if we go back to their docs, there should be an example right here, see, of that import. So I'm going to copy that import and we'll go back to our app.js file and paste it here. Now there's also this link, which we're probably not going to use. So let's just get rid of it from here for now. So this is one thing we need. This is another thing we need, two of these. And both of them we import on top here from this library. Let's actually remove this semicolon since I don't use them. So now once we import this routes and route, basically for each route, we can now define the path. So right now you can see that there's this path /, which is basically our home page. And then this element property on this route component, which basically is going to have this home component passed to it. Now this home component, again, is just a JSX that's going to render. So it's a function that returns some sort of JSX. Currently, our file has no clue what that means. Now, what we can do, we can basically get that function from this component that we've created together. So I can go on top here and do import that home, and I did call it home, so I'm going to use that from, and then we need to basically point to the right folder. So relative to our app.js from our current folder, we'll go to that component folder, and then in that component folder, we have our home.js file. And then I'm going to repeat that same thing for about, which is going to be, again, we're going to import it as about. That's going to be our variable name. And that's the file path. We're pointing to this about component right here. So at this point, we have this home, we have this about, and basically we're saying if you detect that we're in this route, so think about this as like an if statement, then let's render this home component. If we're on this about, let's render about component. So let's see how this works. So I'm going to save this and reload. And you can see how it says app component. And then on that app component, it says home page. And then if we go to that about page, we render this. It still renders the background here because we do have that background class assigned to our home page right now. If I go to that home, see I have this class. And that class, if we go to that CSS file we imported, it basically adds a background picture to that. Now, one thing you'll notice here is that right now, the way we do our CSS, it doesn't matter which component you import this CSS in, it's just available globally for all components. So that's something to remember, and there are some ways to deal with this so it's not available, depending on what you're trying to do. For now, I'm not going to care about it that much. So let's try to pay attention to what happens to our routing system right now. So you'll see that we have now this app that renders this H1 on top. Now, you don't have to have that top part, but I'm trying to show you that other than these, you can have other elements here that render. If you don't want this, you can just get rid of this. And then what's going to happen, it's just going to be whatever you have in this home and whatever you have in this about rendering in these positions and nothing else. So right now, if I save this, go back, we take a look. For our home page, we just say home page, very simple, just like that. And that's because we render basically this home component, which is located here. So if I open this, see, that's all I got. So it should be a section and H1. And if we go back and take a look at our HTML, see, we have section H1. That's it. There's nothing else happening on this page. Now, if I go to that about page, now it's going to render what's in our about page. So basically, it's not going to render any of that stuff from our home component, but it will basically render that about component. And that would be this. At this point, we may want to now figure out how do we link to those pages? Because usually when you have a website, you may have some sort of navigation and people would click on, let's say, homepage, it will go to the homepage. So let's see how we can accomplish that. Now that navigation, I want to load on all pages, no matter which page I'm on here. So for that reason, I'm gonna do it right here above these routes. Now technically, we can create that navigation here, unordered list of some sort, and then do some li. But I want to have this organized, and I don't want to have all this HTML right in the middle of this function. So what we'll do, we'll create another component, and we'll do all of this in that component. So we'll go to this component folder and create another file. We'll call it like nav.js for our navigation. And again, we'll just do our main regular starting point. So I'll just copy this, go to nav, paste it here, and this will be our nav and nav, like so. And then when we have to actually return that navigation, this is where we're going to define all of that stuff. So I'm going to say there's going to be a nav element. Now this is different from this because this is lowercase, our regular HTML nav. And this is our component with uppercase N. And as you know, JavaScript is case sensitive. So those are two different things. So I'll do unordered list. And in this, I'll do two list items. And one of them is basically just going to say home. And the second one is basically going to be our about. Like this. So that's going to be our nav component. We export it here. Let's just make sure we render this on top of all of that other stuff. So if I go to this app.js, I can now import that component on top here, nav, from the same folder. So I just have to rename this to point to the right file. And then right on top, that same place where we used to have that h1, I'll just render that nav component, or basically function. We'll just run that function to get our JSX results and put it right here. Save this. So if I go back now and take a look, see on top of this page, we have that about home. It's not styled, it's not links, but this should be now both on our home page and about page because we have it on top of those routes. So now let's convert them to an actual link. And for that, we're going to go back to our documentation for React Router. And if I scroll down, hopefully we'll get an example. And there it is. See, there is this example link. So I'm going to just copy that example, go to my project, and go to my navigation. And right here, instead of just having this home, I'll just paste this and change this to home. And home should point to this /. Now, we need another one for our about. So I'm going to do about, and the page for that is about. This and this should match what we defined in our paths, right? Because we're sending them to those paths. Basically, we're creating a link to just point to this page and this page. Now, this is not going to know what link is because in this component, link is not defined. So what we'll have to do, we'll have to import that. And again, if we go to their documentation, there should be an import someplace. See right there. That was that link that I deleted from the other import. So I'm going to copy this, go back to this, paste it up here. And in this one, we only have this link. We don't need these two. So I'm going to do this link. Let's remove the semicolon out of here. So now it should know what this link is. And hopefully it's going to create those links. So I'm going to go back. And now see, we have this home and about, and they're actual links. And if I click on home, see, it takes me to the home page. If I click on about, it takes me to about page, I guess. But really what's going on here, we basically just render that component on that same page. We're not really going to any other pages. So let's just take a look at our HTML. So if I look at what this HTML looks like and inspect this, see, essentially what we got, this is that nav we just created with unordered list and li. And within that, we have this hyperlink that points to this homepage. And this one is another hyperlink that points to that about page. And now we can have the system that can recreate multi-page experience. And that's how we can use React Router to do this. So anywhere you want to point a link to something, use this link import and then this link component. And then if you want to define other routes, you go to your main entry point where you actually define your routes. and basically just keep adding more of these. So if you have another one, you just add another one, whatever this page is going to be, and then point to what components should load when you do this. I'm not going to do this one, but we could. So now at this point, let's try to go to some page that we didn't define and see what happens. So I'm going to save this, go back, and go on top here. We're just going to say contact or something. So as you can see, when I did this, it didn't load home. It also didn't load about, but it did load the top part of our page, which is basically this nav. But we did not get this or this. What we do probably have to worry about is what should happen in all the other cases. So you might want to have some sort of catch-all page, 404 page that people usually do, right? So what I would do, I would go here and first let's just create that component here. So I'm going to go under components, create another one. I'm going to call error 404.js. And again, it's just a regular component like any other. So we'll just copy this, paste it here, and just name it So now let's try to import this in our app component. And finally, now that we have this imported, let's now define a route for it. So I'm going to go after all of this, paste one more, and here as a path, I'm going to use star, and we're going to point to that component to load. I'm going to save this, go back. Let's check this out. See if I went to that contact, it says doesn't exist. Now I'm going to go back to home. That's home page, about is about. And if we go to any other page that doesn't exist, that's where we're going to get to, which is basically our catch-all thing here, which is the star path. And that's how we can use the basic router. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.